Welcome to the Be Ready for the World Conference. I'm Eddie Rippeth. I'm the head of primary publishing at Cambridge University Press, and I will be hosting your webinar today. I'm currently sitting in a living room near Cambridge. So I'm delighted today to be joined by Kimberley Silver, who will be taking you through this session on Oracy. Kimberley has taught English in the US, Japan, and Mexico, and is currently a commissioning editor with Cambridge University Press. Right now, she's sitting in her room in Mexico, waiting to speak. Before we start, I just wanted to go through a few points with you first. So first of all, you'll notice your microphones are muted. They will stay on mute as we go through the session, and that's to avoid any background noise. Kimberley and myself, we are, as I mentioned, working from home, hosting the webinar from home. So there may be issues with the internet connection, and in that case, please bear with us. There will be a question and answer session at the end of this webinar, so do post any questions you'd like to ask in the Q&A box. Notice that's not the chat box. You can use the chat box for general comments, but please don't post questions there, as that's not where we'll be looking for the questions. Okay, if you're having technical difficulties with the sound or video, please let us know in the chat and we'll do our best to resolve them. We do recommend you use headphones to listen to this session for the best sound quality. We're recording the webinar and we'll send you a link to the playlist following the conference, so don't worry if you miss anything. And if you're unable to see this Q&A or chat icons, please hover over your mouse at the bottom or the top of the screen and they should appear. So now, over to Kimberley.
Hello from Guanajuato, Mexico. Lovely to be here. Today, I hope to show you the value of integrating Oracy into your English classes and provide you a path to help you get there. We will also discuss some concrete Oracy strategies that can be applied in EML and bilingual schools in any language or in any subject matter. Okay. But first off, we're going to have a little bit of fun. I'm going to ask you all to put on your poet's hat, as I think we all have a little bit of poet in us. And if you could please either get out a piece of paper and a pencil to jot down some little notes, or perhaps open up a program in your screen, and it's just a little fun exercise. So here we go. This is a poem called "My Hat is Dancing on My Head." It was written by Ken Nesbitt. He was the U.S. Poet Laureate for children's poetry between 2013 and 2015. So this poem has just been published in our new Cambridge Primary Reading Anthologies. And here we go. So I've blocked out some words and I want you just to fill in those gaps. Creativity is allowed. Here we go. My hat is dancing on my head. It is not, number one, in a bed. My hat is blue, not green or red. It has a name. I call it number two. My shirt is number three, on my back. It is not hanging on a rack. My shirt is blue, not brown or black. It has a name. I call it number four. My pants are number five, with my shoe. Like all my clothes, they too are blue. My pants are Lance. My shoe is number six. Does all of this sound true to you? So just take a minute, not even a minute, and write those answers. Okay. As I said, creativity is allowed. Okay. And of course, you have to follow the rhyme scheme. That's the other part, and the rhythm. Okay. So hold on to your answers, please. And we will revisit the poem at the end of my presentation as part of an Oracy strategy that you can use in your English classes. So moving on today, we're going to talk about Oracy and what it is. So Oracy, what is it? Oracy refers to the skill of being an effective speaker. And when people think of Oracy, first and foremost, they think of linguistic skills. However, Oracy is a lot more than just speaking accurately with good grammar. It also encompasses physical skills, such as projecting your voice or standing still when you're speaking. Cognitive skills, which include structuring your talk and using evidence to support your arguments. And social emotional skills, such as being a good listener and showing respect for the opinions of others, even if you do not agree with them. So people who are good at Oracy use skills in all 4 of these areas. This is Oracy Morris. He is our Oracy expert in the Cambridge Primary Path Series. Okay, so here are some characteristics of a person with strong Oracy skills. They listen actively. They facilitate shared decision-making. They are good at persuading others. They successfully read group dynamics, and they give effective presentations. So many people assume that Oracy skills are mainly relevant to public speaking. However, they are equally important to collaborative work and discussion. The bottom line here is that people with Oracy skills are effective team players. So one common misconception is that certain people have a gift or a natural talent for Oracy and others don't. Ralph Waldo Emerson makes a really important point here. That is, Oracy is not a skill we are born with. It is a skill that can be learned, just as we learn how to read and write and do math. So for that reason, the sooner that students start working on Oracy, the better. So here are some reasons that I've listed that teachers may have reservations or hesitations about introducing Oracy into their English classes. They may be concerned that their students' speaking skills are not strong enough. They may be stretched for time, which we all know teachers are very stretched for time. They may not have any formal training in Oracy, which is common. And they may not be confident about their own Oracy skills, perhaps even in their own language, never mind in English or in a foreign language. So this is why I urge teachers to really reconsider and think again about incorporating the idea of Oracy in their English classes. So first of all, Oracy is a life skill, and it sits right alongside literacy and numeracy. Many researchers have noted that it has not received the attention that it deserves. Also, your students don't have to be strong English speakers to benefit from work on Oracy. In fact, since the main focus will be on physical, cognitive, and social emotional skills, this will give students a broader range of communication skills that they can work with. Oracy skills can be carried out alongside regular speaking activities. There is a little bit of preparation initially, but once it's been set up, students will expect the focus on Oracy skills whenever they're doing their speaking activities, and it will gradually become second nature to them. And finally, having Oracy skills is not a requirement to teach Oracy. So when you start making time for Oracy in your class, you'll find that your own Oracy skills will benefit as well. And then we have another benefit that is really specific to the ESL and bilingual segment, and that is that Oracy is applicable across all languages that people speak. So students will use these new skills to make, they will use these their new skills both inside the classroom and outside the classroom. Okay. So Oracy education is defined as the explicit teaching of skills involved in using talk to communicate effectively across a range of social contexts. Communicate effectively, it's very important. The goal of proponents of Oracy education in primary is to elevate Oracy to the same level of importance as reading, writing, and math. And the focus on speaking as one of the key skills in primary education is a concept that has been gaining a broader focus in the UK in recent years. Because of the effectiveness of this approach, more and more UK primary schools are including Oracy, their Oracy in their curriculum and this methodology, and even schools with high numbers of ESL students have adopted this education model. So the 3 key reasons to focus on Oracy education are its positive impact on these factors. The first is children's cognitive development and learning in school. So the quality of children's early education experience and the amount of talk that young children are involved in are both powerful predictors of their subsequent achievement in school. And it's not just in language-related subject. This is across the curriculum. It also positively impacts children's confidence and their well-being. This is because students who are able to effectively express themselves and articulate their ideas are more self-confident. And this self-confidence allows them to participate more actively in their own educational processes, which improves their overall well-being. Finally, Oracy supports children's preparation for participation in the wider world. Of course, we know that employers look for employees who have well-developed communication skills. We all know that. And this same skill set equips young people for full participation in democratic processes. So in terms of preparing children for participation in the wider world, Professor Neil Mercer, he's from Cambridge University, points to the value of Oracy in team dynamics to facilitate something he calls interthinking. That is, using talk to think collectively, a key part of group problem solving. And this makes Oracy a very powerful tool for learning because students become better at articulating their ideas and also better at working together. So it's about collaborative problem solving. So a final point here I want to make is that Oracy is a powerful tool for change in this moment when public discourse has been broken down and fragmented by social media, and simultaneously we are confronting very serious global challenges that require all of us to engage with each other and solve big problems. And teaching Oracy skills to young students ultimately will have an impact beyond the classroom. Okay, so now I've explained why Oracy is a crucial life skill. And here I'm going to go into the nuts and bolts of how to do this. Okay, so Oracy skills work can be applied to any classroom activity that involves collaborative work. That could be from working on a project or completing a graphic organizer to discussions or presentations. And those presentations might be formal or informal, say in front of an audience, or even just children presenting in small groups. And these are the tools that you'll need to work with. They are the primary Oracy framework, ground rules, cue cards, and self-assessment and peer assessment. So first I'm going to cover each of these tools, and then I'm going to get into the details of how you apply them to speaking activities. So here we have the first tool, which is the primary Oracy framework. Okay. And we've already seen there are 4 skill areas that need to be developed to build their skills. Since linguistic skills are already part of your English class, that's your focus, they have not been included here. But at higher levels of Oracy work, of course, we also work on honing linguistic skills as well. Here, the framework focuses on the physical skills, the cognitive skills, and the social emotional skills. And it's broken down by level. So we have by the end of foundation, which is 1st grade, by the end of 2nd grade, by the end of 4th grade, and by the end of 6th grade. So they're building confidence through these levels. So you'll find in each of these levels, you'll find can-do statements, which build on the skills in the previous level. So here I'm going to show you a close-up view of one of the can-do statements that shows expected student outcomes for each level. So notice how the expectations for the student outcomes grow as students progress through the grade levels. So at the end of 1st grade, I can take turns and listen to others. I can take by the end of 2nd grade, I can take turns and listen to others in a discussion. By the end of 4th grade, I can recognize and respect the feelings and views of others in a discussion. And by the end of 6th grade, I can respect and respond appropriately to the feelings of others in a discussion. These can-do statements can be further broken down into specific skills, and when taken all together, these will help students achieve the desired outcomes. So here I've listed some specific Oracy skills that are needed for students to participate successfully in a discussion. See? So physical skills, these might include these are just some of a big list, right? Making eye contact, projecting your voice, speaking clearly. Cognitive skills, asking for clarification, expressing your opinions, and social emotional skills, listening actively, taking turns, and eliciting the participation of others. So if you notice other issues you want to nip in the bud that are causing problems with your classes, such as students talking too loudly or interrupting, you can focus on those skills. And it's very important to remember that for students just starting out in Oracy, for those low-level primary students, you want to focus at one skill at a time to keep it manageable. So the next tool is Oracy ground rules. And we need ground rules. Why do we need them? Because we are setting guidelines for the speaking activities by reminding students what is needed for effective communication. So the ground rules also remind students to pay attention to their talk and how they are communicating. In other words, the idea is that they're keeping Oracy present in their minds. And most of these Oracy rules are not complicated. It's simply a question of helping students notice them and keeping them present so that they gradually become second nature. And finally, Oracy, finally, ground rules also will support and provide points of reference for assessment. That's so that students know what they need to monitor, and they can more accurately assess their talk. Okay, so how do we set up Oracy ground rules? For starters, it's very important that students themselves are involved in defining the ground rules. Imposing ground rules from the top is not as effective as encouraging students to talk about them and to define them. So what we try to do is we're encouraging students to engage so they have ownership over these rules. Ideally, there should be 2 sets of ground rules, and they vary based on the activity type. Okay, so we have a set of ground rules that would be for discussions and collaborative activities, and another set of ground rules for for presentations. No, and for presentations, there would be 2 types of rules. One is for the rules for the presenter, and the others would be rules for the audience. So next you'll create a poster with these rules, actually 2 posters, okay, and post them in the classroom where they're visible from any vantage point. During speaking activities, the idea is you'll be referring to these posters as needed. And when setting up a speaking task, you can refer to those ground rules. Yeah, depending on the nature of the task, then you'll point out the rules and emphasize the rules that are needed. Here are some examples of ground rules for collaboration and discussion. These are pretty straightforward. And as I just mentioned, the students would have defined these beforehand with your guidance. And this list is by no means exhaustive. Think of other possibilities that would be important for collaboration and discussion. Okay. So another tool that we need to make our Oracy classes work are cue cards. And cue cards are basically the relevant functional language that we use. These are important handholds for students, and they may vary based on the activity that we're doing. So before any activity, we'll present the functional language formally, and then we can attach the cue cards to the board or place them on a table in the middle of a group. So for more structured Oracy practice, students can pick up or they can point to the cards before they speak. And of course, Oracy, the functional language on these cards is quite repetitive. They will be used again and again. So I recommend laminating them, as they'll come back to them again and again. And one other point is that language teachers, we have a temptation to think that this is the focus, that this functional language is the focus of the activity. But in fact, for Oracy, the goal is not the functional language. That's just a support. What the goal needs to be focusing on the target Oracy skill. Okay, our final tool is assessment. And this is a really big part of the Oracy methodology. So every Oracy activity will end in a brief assessment with the aim of evaluating the task and the target Oracy skill. So regular, consistent assessment is key to ensuring that students' awareness of skills becomes second nature. And there are 2 types of assessment. We have self-assessment and peer assessment. You can decide which one you think is best for any particular activity. But I think it is important to vary, because what it does is it teaches children to change the focus from themselves or to their peers, okay? And one fun idea that we recommend is something called talk detectives for peer assessment. In this sort of strategy, the talk detectives are observers. They are not participating in the activities. So you choose those kids, and then at the end of the activities, they will feed back to the class on what they observed. To make this playful, you can give them a special badge or hat and make them feel special. So it's very important to remember that the objective is not to point out which students are doing it right and which students are doing it wrong, which might be the temptation with primary level children. You need to remind them and sort of guide them in making sure that they're providing anonymous general feedback, okay? And the evaluation includes the following. You will ask about if the students followed the ground rules, if they executed the target oracy skill, and if they used the language on the cue cards. Those are sort of the main pointers. So here are some examples of self and peer assessment. These would be statements that could be used for setting the marks. And for peer assessment, I would recommend assigning students a partner. You can have them focus on that person, or you can also ask students to focus on the performance of a full group. It just depends on how you want to set this up. This is very flexible. So an important reminder, keeping Oracy assessment quick and light is essential for primary. You need to get the students to, especially for the lower primary students, you need to get them to reflect on their performance and move on. So for example, you can go through the assessment statements one at a time and have students stand up if they agree or stay seated if they don't, or you can have them write the statements in their notebook and draw a little smiley face next to the ones they successfully carried out. So the point here is reflection, right? Assessment in this situation is not for the purpose of grading. Students shouldn't feel intimidated or nervous, and it's just simply designed to help them reflect. For upper primary students, we can go a little deeper. So students, and I would normally have them grade themselves on a scale from 1 to 5 for each of these statements. And you can encourage them, this is an important part of it with the older kids, is to have them reflect carefully and talk about their talk and what they did right and what they did wrong. When you can talk about which ground rules were broken or what they could have done differently, how they could have improved their talk next time. So here we have, so with these 4 tools that I just mentioned, and if I would test you, if I could see you, but I can't. So the 4 tools are the Oracy framework, ground rules, cue cards, and self-assessment and peer assessment. And with 4 steps, you're on your way to integrating Oracy in your class. So for the first step 1, before the class, you need to select an Oracy skill that is compatible with the specific type of speaking activity. So in this case, I just made it up, visualizing a 5th grade class. Okay, and let's imagine that they're working together to complete a graphic organizer. This activity is going to combine collaborative work and discussion. And the target Oracy skill that I've chosen is eliciting the participation of others. So why? Because that's useful for this group to work together and to complete a graphic organizer. Then I need to present the Oracy skill and make sure students understand why it is important. Okay, so there's 2 ways of doing this, and you can use both approaches, one or either. Okay, so in this case, the first option is giving an example of bad Oracy. Okay, and that sounds a little strange, but the idea is to make students reflect on what happens when a few students dominate the discussion and don't let other students talk. This is very common, right? So you ask students, how do you feel when somebody doesn't let you talk? Or what happens when a few students talk in a discussion, and you get a discussion going around that situation? Okay, that's one way of really sensitizing students to the topic. And then the second possibility, which you may do both of them, depending on how it's going, is you encourage students to consider the benefits of the target Oracy skill. So how do you feel when someone asks for your opinion? What happens when everyone participates in a discussion, right? So in this case, you're trying to encourage students to think about why more opinions make for richer discussion, even if, very important, everyone does not agree, okay? So finally, for lower primary students, I think it's absolutely fine to have this discussion in L1, okay? If they don't have the level in their other language, okay? So the idea is to get them as engaged as possible. It's about the content, not the language, okay? The third step is eliciting the ground rules, right? And distributing the cue cards. So remember, in this case, I just put some up here. Some ground rules here. You can write these rules on the board. There are no right or wrong rules, and the students decide. And of course, you can guide them. Okay, if you feel there are things that they haven't considered. Finally, you will distribute the cue cards. So if you notice for this filling out a graphic organizer and eliciting the participation of others, these 2 cue cards were carefully selected to reflect what language they need to use, okay? And finally, so the students will have carried out that you'll need to, before the activity, you do need to set up the self or peer assessment. That's pretty straightforward. You decide what the configuration is. And then you will move on to carry out the post assessment afterwards, no? And in this case, I chose these peer assessment statements. That was what I thought would work for this activity. So after the activity, you will have them assess which ground rules were broken and what they could do next time to improve their talk. So that more or less concludes the roadmap for integrating Oracy into your English classes, okay? So moving on, I want to introduce a collaborative Oracy activity for primary students that is well suited to the EML bilingual segment, as it requires an upper intermediate level of English. So exploratory talk is reasoned discussion that depends on interthinking. This was that concept I mentioned of Neil Mercer's. That is using talk to think collectively. So talking points can be used to support exploratory talk. It's not the only strategy, but it's one really good strategy to do this. So you'll notice these are thought-provoking statements which require creative or analytical thinking, no? And from these examples, you can see how the talking points can really lead to an engaging discussion, right? It's rude to disagree with other people. The best things cost a lot of money, and some cultures are better than others. So these are just some I picked, and teachers can pick whatever topic they're working on, and it could be related to, if they're teaching science, they could do it for science class. So these are just some I picked off, just picked from the top of my head. So the objective here is to get the group to reach an agreement on these talking points, okay? And the guidelines are that everyone is encouraged to participate and to give reasons. Students are prepared to accept challenges, and all contributions are treated with respect. Alternatives should be discussed before a decision is made. So for classes that are new to the Oracy methodologies, the teacher will have to engage heavily in this discussion, as they're going to be acting as a guide to demonstrate how students can make their discussion more productive. And there's a lot of teacher engagement and participation here. But once students learn the methodology, then they will be able to do it on their own as they get older, okay? Below here, I've listed a Cambridge website with some fantastic downloadable resources to help you develop exploratory talk and in your own classes. So we came around back to the poem. Okay, so you can look at your answers, look at the answers, compare them, see if you got them right. Did you guess the names of the clothing correctly? The hat is Fred, and the shirt is Jack, and the shoe is Lou. just in case you weren't sure what they were. So here, so I used this poem, okay, and this poem as a sort of the basis for an exploratory talk activity. And what you'll do is you can work through the poem, and that's the first part of it. And then the second part of it is having talking points for exploratory talk. So after they've worked on the poem, you could use these talking points or others, no, to generate a richer discussion around the poem. Okay, the man in this poem is crazy, old people aren't very much fun, and silly poems are better than serious ones. Okay. Finally, I wanted to clarify that Oracy can be introduced in any subject or language. So in fact, there is a growing network of primary schools in the UK called Voice 21 Oracy schools. And in these schools, the Oracy methodology is used across the curriculum. So the focus in these schools is a collaborative methodology that puts speaking at the heart of every subject, even subjects such as math and science. So that's really interesting. I've placed a link for a video here. I would love to show it to you, but we don't have time. And I highly recommend checking out this video and the Voice 21 site. In this video, you can see second and third grade students who have been immersed in this Oracy methodology for, well, at least a year since they were in first grade. Some of them may have been sooner. And you will not believe how articulate and confident and engaged these young learners are in the discussions, and the teacher is leading, but the kids themselves, they're working sometimes in small groups and pairs, and you'll see just how amazingly engaged they are and what they're able to talk about. And for second and third graders, it is truly impressive. And here's another list. Sorry, here's a list of recommended resources. As I mentioned in the previous slide, Voice 21 is a nonprofit that supports a network of schools that they've become an inflection point really for Oracy research and Oracy education and research. So this site of the Voice 21 website offers impact studies and a lot of useful resources, as well as the videos I mentioned before. So Oracy Cambridge at Hughes Hall, that website right there, Oracy Cambridge, has articles and online resources from a team of researchers at Cambridge, and they're led by Professor Neil Mercer. Like Voice 21, these researchers are working very hard to promote Oracy education with the goal of it eventually becoming part of the national UK curriculum. And finally, I've included a white paper by Cambridge that is, I've taken a few of the ideas today from that white paper on exploratory talk especially. So please check that out if you'd like to know more. And for the exploratory talk point, you can actually see that it's got detailed of how the teacher would guide the conversation. And that's important. It will give you really clear tips on how you would guide the discussion. Okay, it was sort of beyond what I could do today because of our time. And finally, I invite you to check out my blog about incorporating Oracy with an ELT focus. Okay, and I've included Oracy strategies for lower primary and preschoolers, how to teach Oracy remotely. And you'll also in this blog find a link to that Oracy framework that I showed with the can-do statements. So that's it. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Kimberley. That was absolutely fascinating. I really loved the talk you gave and the examples you gave. I wasn't very good at the poetry exercise, but we've had a lot of questions.
okay.
So I will go straight into them. And I'm going to try and combine them because, as I say, we've got a lot to get through in a very short space of time. So the first one's about definitions. So
Yes.
Ethelinda and Callum were asking, how is Oracy different to oral skills? And can it be treated as a separate segment of speaking skills? So it's a bit about
okay.
Oracy.
I would say, I'm thinking in terms of functional language and working with functional language skills. So I'm going to give it from the perspective of our course, which is that we it's all under the umbrella of Oracy. Wait, Oracy is speaking, so you can't really separate it out. Except for that, you can focus on functional language and on building functional language. And that's not really Oracy. So as I said, functional language is a part of Oracy. It's a tool within the Oracy methodology in the framework, but it's not the goal. So that's kind of the separation. So in our course, what we did is we have, to give you an idea, we have pages that work on, I don't know, ordering an ice cream and that type of language, if we were going to be doing that. And that will build the actual language itself and the practice behind building that specific set of functional language. But Oracy is not going to focus on the language. It's always going to focus on the skill of communication. Does that answer the question?
I think so. That's great.
Okay. Uh-huh.
The next one I've got is very much around, obviously you're working, with teaching Oracy skills to children. It's around how do you motivate them, and how do you maintain their confidence? So Shatha has made a very good point here. So she says, I think one way to show that we care about our students' feelings and to show respect and not interrupting them, even if they've misspelled some words or have grammatical mistakes. Do you agree? We also had I think a linked one coming from the other side is young learners seem not to understand turn taking. How do you ensure the
Okay, hold on.
So that's sort of side.
Yes. So in relationship to confidence, building confidence, and I've had questions around shy students. How do we manage shy students with this methodology? So it looks really potentially like an impossible methodology for shy students. And in fact, Oracy is an amazing methodology for that reason. So you start out, first of all, I would, in terms of students that might be maybe not as engaged or shy or a little withdrawn. No. You're not going to ever push those students. You're going to always give those students their space and let them come into the center. No. So I want to just say, as a start, if you always want to start out really just gently, and there's always going to be those students who are dominating, and those are the ones that are coming first. And that's where we have problems, right? Because we have the students that come into that and just want to dominate and be at the front of the class. And it's really hard to pull the kids that aren't, that because of their own maybe self-confidence, or there could be many reasons, maybe they're just not as engaged or whatever. So the idea here is really building confidence through this methodology. This is what I love about it so much, and I think why it can be so powerful, is that you bring students' attention gently through this methodology about what they're doing. Oh, maybe I'm not letting that other student talk. Maybe I'm, they suddenly become aware of it, because since they're always self-assessing, in some way, they're always looking either at themselves or their peers are looking at them and feeding back to them. They're suddenly made very aware of what is going on. And so I think it's incredibly useful in helping students who are shy. So it wouldn't be that the first day you would, immediately, you would let those shy students stay and around the edges, but eventually this strategy will bring them around. I really urge people to watch those videos on Voice 21. That it's mind-blowing how these second and third graders are talking, but once they've gotten used to it, it's just second nature to them. So I'm very excited about it because I've seen how impressive it is. And turn taking as well. This is the same thing. It's the same thing. So again, you have trouble with kids that just want to push to the front and other kids that kind of hang back. It's the same thing. So we really need to focus on the skill of taking turns, of letting that person have your turn is an Oracy skill. So that was in the lower levels, we worked on that. In like first and second grade, we talk about that. And in preschool, for the preschool segment, we also talk about the cooperative behaviors. So because preschool, there's Oracy in preschool as well. And so the focus is on cooperative behaviors. And then as they get older, they can be more sophisticated, no? Yeah.
Okay, the next one kind of touches on that. The point of, is Oracy right for all students? So I've got how Ra has got a question. Can I teach Oracy to ESL students who can barely express themselves orally because of their limited vocabulary and exposure? And I'd like to link that also to Farden, who says Oracy books are higher levels for ESL students and mixed classes. It is hard to learn for them. So can you address this?
So Oracy, I'm not sure what they mean by Oracy books, but what I want to say is, so what I was trying to make really clear in this presentation is that whatever you're doing, so it can be your regular, whatever you're doing, it can be a poem, it could be something that you're covering, you know, a reading, it can be math. All of anything that involves a discussion or collaboration or a presentation, but I want to go with the collaboration and the discussion is fertile ground for Oracy. So don't have this idea that that's what I really tried to make this presentation very accessible and low level for that reason, to make you understand that you don't have to be, it's not something up here, it's something really, really down here and very accessible at even the most basic levels. So I would say yeah, I just lost my train of thought.
So it's essentially Oracy starts right at the start, even for children who can barely express themselves.
Exactly, right, okay, exactly. I'll say in preschool, we do Oracy. In preschool, we focus more on cooperative behaviors and we bring that to their attention. Okay, so it's actually, a lot of this, in fact, is what would be considered best practice in preschool, right? Sharing, taking turns, listening actively, all of that is what we would do in a good best practices in preschool. So, but what we have to do is make that something that they're constantly reflecting on so that they don't forget and so that it becomes part of the dynamic of the class. And the question about the ESL students or it could be even the ELT, I did try to make it clear. So you can, the language isn't the important part, it's the behavior and the skill. And for the exploratory talk, right, that I wouldn't recommend for a really low level class. You can do it, the teacher can do it and it can be highly guided, but in that case you have to bring it way, way down to the level of the students. But I think the skills themselves are what we have to focus on. And as long as we are coming back to those skills and reminding students and doing the assessing post activity, you get them into that framework and it becomes second nature. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, I think I have time for one more question, which is very, very sort of appropriate for the times we're living in, obviously, is around, can you give some ideas on how to include Oracy in online classes? And again, from Sarah, you've got, how can we apply Oracy in homeschool?
Okay, so I have a blog I wrote about that. And please go, if you go to my blog link, you can actually read all my specific recommendations. So doing Oracy online starts out with those ground rules and setting ground rules. And one recommendation I make, so it actually really helps support the online classroom because the ground rules can be linked to how we're managing ourselves in this digital world, right? And so it's fantastic because you can make kids think, oh, yeah, I probably shouldn't just talk over the other students. There's students that just, if everybody's audio or video are on and they'll just start talking and teacher, teacher, teacher. Well, it's really common. So in this case, you start out with having the ground rules, setting the ground rules for that, also for chats, setting ground rules for chats and when's appropriate and when's not appropriate, setting rules for chat rooms. And then you can make those rules visible. I would actually make a poster and physically make them visible. And you can have the talk detectives for these online court classes. For example, you say, today, so-and-so is the talk detective, and they're going to tell us at the end of the class what we did right and what we did wrong. This can be done for any level. And so that's fun because there's a child or two children that are working on thinking about what is it that that the class is doing, and they report back. And so they all become more reflective about what they're doing, and that way they can control some of these behaviors that aren't working online. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have time for one very last question, which came up earlier, but it's come up again with Sanam's question, which is, are there any particular activities or strategies more for high school students of English as a second language?
Yeah, absolutely. So Oracy carries on, and as students get more successful at it, and their level, the level of sophistication of the discussions will increase, right? I'm gonna take you back to that white paper. That white paper is really more targeted for ESL students, and even I would even say the native speaker range. So you'll find in that paper, it is primary focused, but for older students, you just take that further. So what happens at the next phase? At the next phase, we start looking at, once they've mastered the sort of the basic skill set, you start looking at language and how to make, for example, clarity in when you're speaking, and different speaking techniques and presentation techniques, and how to make sure your talk is in order, but at a higher level. No? So you just move the skills up as appropriate. And I would add that students that have been doing this methodology for a long time, that voice in their head, they almost at some point will probably not need to have that self-assessment.
I just want to say thank you very much, Kim. That was an incredibly rich and thorough 45 minutes packed with information there. You've given us a whole load of links. The session is recorded. I just want to thank all of our listeners for all of your questions. My apologies if I didn't get around to answering yours. As I said, we'll be uploading a recording of the session to YouTube, so you've got a chance to revisit the webinar. Also revisit all of those links that Kim's given.
The links will help you, and the Voice 21 Oracy, that site, go to that site. You'll be fascinated, I assure you.
I will certainly be going to that site.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah.
So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay healthy. And thank you again for joining us. And I hope there's other talks in the series that you'll be joining us with too. So thank you and bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao. Bye.